Welcome to the deep dive. Sometimes you just want to get straight to the core of a topic, right? Understand it quickly but properly.
Exactly. Cut through the noise.
Well, that's our plan today. We're taking a closer look at Arad in Romania, specifically the Neolog Synagogue there. We've got some really interesting historical facts and details about where it stands today. Our mission, if you like, is to pull out the most important, the most compelling parts of its story and figure out why it still matters.
Yeah, and we're drawing on historical records, details about the building itself and its current status. We want to get a sense of the journey of this community in this building.
And that term, Neolog, maybe we should quickly touch on that.
Oh, right. Good point. So Neolog Judaism was a movement mostly in the 19th century, especially in Hungary and surrounding areas. They advocated for certain reforms, sort of modernizing religious practices, maybe incorporating things like organs or sermons in the local language.
Got it. Okay, so let's start at the beginning in Arad. The Jewish presence there seems to go back quite a way, maybe the 18th century, but it sounds like it started small.
That's right. The very first records we have point to around 1717. It wasn't a huge wave of settlement, more like two merchant families initially.
Just two families?
Yeah, they were apparently under the protection of the local authorities, which maybe suggests, certain economic benefits or perhaps just a level of tolerance at that specific time. They formed the very first seed of the community there.
Interesting how big things start small. And from those two families, things started to develop.
They did. By 1740, the community, though likely still small, was already thinking about a proper place of worship. They actually petitioned the local council in Bratislava, quite far away, asking for tax relief on building materials for a synagogue.
And they mentioned a donation.
Yes, exactly. They mentioned a woman named Nahuma had donated a vacant plot of land. That really shows, commitment quite early on, building that communal space.
So they got their first synagogue built.
They did in 1759. It was a wooden structure initially. Simple, maybe, but significant. And a few years later, they had their first rabbi leading services there.
So a real functioning community taking shape.
Absolutely. A dedicated space, religious leadership.
Yeah.
Those are key steps.
Okay, let's jump forward a bit, because the community didn't stay small. By 1828, the numbers were much bigger.
Oh, yeah. Significantly. The records say 812 members by 1828. That's quite a jump from just two families a century earlier.
And with that growth comes needs, I suppose, like a bigger synagogue.
Precisely. The old wooden one probably just wasn't adequate anymore, and this is where two important figures come in, Rabbi Aaron Koren and Judge Moses Herschel. They saw the need and started planning for a new, much larger, more permanent building.
The Neolog Synagogue we're focused on.
That's the one. Construction started in 1828.
But it wasn't exactly smooth sailing, was it? Sounds like they ran into some local opposition.
That's putting it mildly. The sources are quite clear that the local authorities in R were, well, not supportive. They actively tried to obstruct and delay the construction.
Any idea why? Was it general anti-Jewish sentiment or something specific?
The materials don't specify the exact why, but it certainly points to a difficult climate for the Jewish community at the time. It highlights those classic challenges minority groups often faced, trying to establish themselves.
And they actually started building without getting the final permit. That sounds risky.
It does. They began work in 1828, apparently in the inner courtyard of a larger complex they planned. This whole complex was quite ambitious, meant to include the synagogue, the rabbi's homes, schoolrooms, even shops facing the street.
Wow. So they were trying to be discreet, starting in the courtyard.
Seems like a strategic move, yeah. Get things moving while maybe hoping to sort out the permit issues or just push past the obstruction, but the authorities kept interfering.
Right, they kept trying to stop it.
They did, which leads to this really fascinating twist in the story, thanks to Judge Moses Herschel.
Okay, what did he do? This sounds like where it gets interesting.
It really is. Faced with constant opposition and the real possibility of the whole project being shut down permanently, Judge Herschel came up with, frankly, a brilliant idea. He proposed offering the unfinished synagogue building as a gift to the emperor in Vienna.
To the emperor? Seriously?
Seriously. A direct appeal, completely bypassing the troublesome local authorities. It was quite an audacious move. You have to wonder if that was a common trick or if he was just particularly sharp.
And did it work?
It worked. The emperor accepted the gift. which meant the building effectively became imperial property.
Ah, so suddenly the local council in Arad couldn't touch it.
Exactly. Their objections became meaningless. It was under the emperor's protection. A really clever piece of political maneuvering.
That is amazing. So after all that drama, it was finally finished.
Yes, completed in 1834, 6 years after they started, despite all the hurdles.
And we know who designed it.
We do. The architect was Domokos Helm, and the style is described as neoclassical, specifically Tuscan.
Neoclassical. So pillars, symmetry, that kind of grand look.
Probably, yes. Think Roman temples, that sort of influence. The Tuscan element might suggest certain materials or details, giving it maybe a slightly warmer, grounded feel alongside the grandeur. It would be interesting to know if it had specific design choices reflecting the Neolog ideas, too.
And later, they added an organ in 1841.
That's right. And the organ is often a key feature in Neolog synagogues. It wasn't just about the music. It sort of symbolized an engagement with wider European culture, blending tradition with contemporary elements, a big step away from older traditions.
Okay, so bringing us more up to date. The synagogue is still there, obviously. Who owns it now?
It's still owned by the Jewish community of Arad, which is, quite something considering everything that's happened in Europe since the 1830s.
Definitely. And there are current contact people listed, a president and secretary.
Yeah.
So the community is still active.
It seems so. Maintaining a connection to this major historical site, it says a lot about their persistence. You wonder what challenges they face today, keeping such an old building going.
For anyone thinking of visiting, is it accessible?
Yes, the information says visits are possible, but you need to arrange it beforehand on request. There are GPS coordinates provided, which is handy.
And no entry fee?
Apparently not, which is quite welcoming, inviting people to learn about its history.
Do they still hold services there?
Yes, it seems they do, though the services are led by a rabbi who comes from Timisoara, another city nearby.
Okay.
And interestingly, it's also used for cultural events for the Jewish community. But there's a catch.
Oh.
Only in spring and summer, because the building doesn't have a heating system.
Ah, the joys of historic building maintenance. That really paints a picture of the practical realities, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's still a living center, but you have to work around the building's limitations.
And getting there, is it easy for visitors?
Looks like it. There's good public transport access, mentions several tram lines. And if you're driving, public parking is available nearby, though you have to pay for it.
Standard city parking, yeah.
But making that practical info available is great for encouraging visits.
And the notes also mention other things to see nearby.
Yeah, quite a few points of interest listed, like the house with lacquer, the train bridge, and significantly, the old theater, also known as the Herschel Theater.
Ah, Herschel. Named after the same judge, Moses Herschel, who saved the synagogue project.
That's the connection, yes. Really ties the synagogue into the broader history of the city. There's also the Roman Preparatory School, a couple of Serbian churches, plenty to make a day of it.
And places to stay and eat nearby, too?
Yep, a couple of hotels and restaurants are listed. It helps you see the synagogue not just as some isolated monument, but as part of the living city of Arad.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive on the Arad Neolog Synagogue, what are the main things that stand out to you?
Well, for me, it's definitely the resilience, the sheer persistence of the Arad Jewish community, from those first two families right through to today.
Right.
And then there's that construction story. It's just so compelling, the opposition, the secret start, and that incredibly clever move by Judge Herschel.
That imperial gift idea is definitely memorable.
It really is. And finally, just its ongoing life. It's still a place of worship, a cultural hub. Even with challenges like no heating, it endures.
I agree. That story of overcoming the opposition by, well, essentially outsmarting them at a higher level, It really makes you think, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, it makes you ponder how often obstacles, things deliberately put in the way to stop something, actually end up pushing events in a completely unexpected, maybe even bigger direction. Like the emperor's involvement here, which probably gave the synagogue even more status in the long run.
That's a really interesting thought. What other kinds of opposition, maybe social or political forces we see as just negative roadblocks, might actually be shaping history in ways we don't immediately recognize?
Exactly. Something for you, the listener, to think about. How unforeseen consequences can arise from attempts to block change. A fascinating angle to consider.